Hello, and welcome to the Real San Diego podcast, where I interview inspiring and interesting people, dive into hot topics and communities around San Diego, and more. I'm your host, Cece Summerfield, and this week I'm talking with Amy. Her and her husband Michael own Yoga One in Mission Hills, and she has a really inspiring story about a major career change, faraway travels, and bringing her yoga practice to San Diego over 20 years ago when it really hadn't been heard of yet. All right. Well, hey, Amy, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. Well, everybody, I'm here with Amy, the owner of Yoga One, and here in Mission Hills. And I'm so happy to meet with you today. And I mean, we got a chance to talk a little bit beforehand, but I would like to, share with everybody your story. Like, tell us a little bit about yourself and just start from the beginning, I guess, really.
So, where to begin? Well, we've had the studio Yoga One since 2002, and that started downtown. But even before that, my husband and I worked in the music business in Los Angeles, and we did that for about 5 years, and that's where we met. And we both just were seeking more, something different, alternative lifestyles, just kind of get, out of that situation and just see what other possibilities were. And so we ended up quitting our jobs and sort of paying off our debt and backpacking around the world for about 3 years.
Sounds amazing.
And during that time, we discovered yoga.
Yeah.
And so because we were so interested in learning more, we ended up spending 6 months in India.
Oh, wow.
And did a deep dive of studying
That's a
there.
deep dive, for sure.
Yes, so that was a really amazing experience. We lived with a family for 6 weeks, and the son who lived there arranged for a private yoga master to come to our home where we were staying with an Indian family every day, 6 days a week, for 6 weeks. And so we just were reading tons and just learning so much, and really in an amazing phase of life. And so when we came back to the States, we decided not to live in LA, ended up in San Diego. And Yoga One was born shortly thereafter, actually. I had only been teaching for a short time and had an opportunity and just kind of went with it.
What an amazing time. I just can't even begin to fathom that experience. And to transition from what I would think is a real busy business, in music and stuff, and just go to something more grounded and just, feeling the earth, basically, and really taking care of yourself inwardly, too. Such an amazing transition. What was the, breaking point for you where you're like, I really need to get out of this music business and do something different? And where exactly did you find yoga? I mean, at what point in your travels were you like, this is the thing that I'm going to do?
Yes, it's interesting. So lots of different answers to that question. So, one of the things I think for me was that my father had passed away when I was in my 20s. And I just kind of started questioning, what is the purpose and meaning of life, and is this doing what we're doing in the music business, which was so fun and really fulfilling in a lot of ways, is this going to be enough for the long haul? And does this suit sort of our bigger picture of how we want to live in the world? And, being in, again, early 20s, there were still so many questions. So I think that was one of the catalysts, and then meeting Michael, my husband, was also a catalyst. I basically told him when we met, hey, I'm planning to move to England. I'm going to get a job in the music business there as a launching off point. And he said, well, if you wait for me, I'll go with you. So we moved in together. We waited a year, and we planned our trip. And so we started in Australia, and we were working to earn money along the way. One of the things we did was pick apples. And while we were doing that, it's really physical labor. We ended up getting a book on healthy living, and I had one chapter on yoga. So,
okay.
Yeah.
There was the seed that got planted.
The seed, yes,
That
exactly.
is so interesting. So I didn't pick pears. I sorted pears in a pear shed when I was very young, because that was what you did in Northern California during the summertime if you couldn't find another job.
Yes.
And I can tell you, I would never want, it's like the worst job in the world.
Oh my gosh, we did try grape picking at one point as well. And that for me was so hard. I had so many cuts on my hands.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Apples, at least it was physically tiring, but it wasn't as dangerous. And you were climbing up and down ladders and then putting them in these bags you carried on your body. So by finding this yoga at the end of the book, we would do like 30, 45 minutes of really simple stuff, like recline spinal twist, cat-cow, hugging your knees into your chest. But it just felt so amazing at the end of a really long physical day.
Yes,
So
for sure.
Yeah, that was the beginning.
That is so cool. So you decided not to go back to LA, and you picked San Diego, and you mentioned to me that you felt at that time that San Diego was still just a little bit more sleepy. Was that part of the draw to San Diego, and because it was just a little more quiet, a little slower pace?
I think the slower
LA?
pace, yes. My mom and some of my family were still in Los Angeles. We wanted to be not too far from them. At the same time, yes, we were looking for a place where we could not have to have so much traffic, such a pace of life.
Yep.
And so San Diego did feel like a really good fit at that time, and still so happy that we landed here. I can't imagine, a better place.
I mean, I came from a very sleepy place, so San Diego was a huge city to me. But then when I got here, I realized very quickly that there's so many little micro neighborhoods, so not all of it feels like city. Downtown San Diego was my closest big city growing up was San Francisco. So when I came down here, I was like pleasantly surprised to see that there was other areas, and it was kind of more spread out than just the main city.
Yes.
And I was just drawn to the ocean, and that's what brought me down here. My sister was living here too, but it really was living next to the coast, which is what I really wanted to do. So, so you landed kind of in the same spot I did, which was Ocean Beach. You're close to that area when you first got here.
Yes.
And I've been there forever, so 20-something years. But you ended up opening a studio downtown. What was it? Just that there was space available, or did you have some kind of draw to downtown to start the business?
It's interesting. There were so many synchronicities along the way. Yeah. So I really started by teaching donation classes in Balboa Park. And at that time, there really wasn't a lot of yoga happening in this part of San Diego. All the yoga was up in North County. And so people would often, I had a little like A-frame sign I would just put out for class. It was by donation. People would stop and say, oh, hey, what are you doing? What is that? Is it a dance? Is it,
oh, really?
Is it a martial art? Like people didn't really even know what they were observing. And so that class really took off, and it was maybe I had 20 people that were coming regularly to this class in the park. And so at that time, I started renting spaces all around this area in Hillcrest, Mission Hills, Bankers Hill area. And one of the spaces I ended up at was downtown. And the gentleman who owned that gym basically said, hey, things are going so well for you. Do you want to sublease this space and just take it over completely? He was looking to
very cool.
load his like aerobics room, just, offset his rent a little bit. So we did that. So we went from donation classes in the park to opening the studio downtown.
I love that kind of story where you go do something and you find passion in this yoga in another country where it all began, and bring it back to San Diego, and you start teaching. Now, I know that there's a big difference between being a student in a class and teaching a class. How did you get yourself out there, and how did you motivate to get, to teach and not be super nervous?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's so crazy. We do a lot of teacher trainings, and we talked about that a little bit before. I mean, I still tell my students, I still get nervous. And I think often, I don't know if you experience this with the podcast as well, but I think part of that nervous energy is that we care about what we're doing. And I think that that's an okay thing. But once I landed in San Diego, I continued my training with Roger Cole. He's an Iyengar yoga teacher who also was in North County, like Del Mar area. And then I did a Ashtanga Vinyasa training with Tim Miller, who also had been teaching yoga for many years in North County. So I did
get some
training my
here.
Education and get some more training here before I really went out. But even still, I was new, and I was nervous, but people seemed to really respond well, and that kind of reciprocal relationship. You really see that people are benefiting from the practice, and letting go of our need to be perfect, I think, is part of that practice for both teacher and student.
So I started doing videos and stuff, educational videos or stuff about, buying and selling real estate, the business I'm in. Probably back in 2014, I would say. And some of those videos I look back, I'm like, erase it, cut. But what I learned out of all of it is it's better done than perfect.
Yes.
And you cannot be perfect, and nobody's going to like themselves on video. So you just have to flow with it.
Yes.
That's why I was curious, like with teaching and stuff, and just keeping your class motivated and in tune with what's happening in the class. And that's always, I think, a real, technique to do that. It comes from time and experience, but, just getting started with the donation classes, I'm sure you're like, okay, this is all gonna work.
Yeah.
You know?
I feel like in a weird way, I mean, maybe there was a little less pressure. One, like yoga was, I think, new to a lot of my students. It was like early or first exposure. And so also I think that because I was new, I didn't put quite as much pressure on myself.
Sure.
I feel like now at some point mid teaching, it actually got harder because then I really had this desire to, I had so much that I wanted to share.
Yeah.
And because there was so much that I wanted to share, I put pressure on myself in how I did that. And I will say maybe I'm coming around the backside. I think with maturity, I mean, having done this for 20 years, like you said, there's more of a comfort with like, hey, we're not looking for perfection here.
Right.
And we're having this relationship and I'm really learning how to be a good listener, both through my eyes and what I see and what I hear from the students. And so being present and being present as you teach is really just a continuation of your yoga practice. And so I think all that training comes together in our teaching, and then you don't feel so much pressure around it anymore.
And what advice do you give the teachers that you teach? Because you teach a teaching teacher's course, I guess was what you call it.
Yes.
What advice do you give them when they're trying to start going from being the student to the teacher?
Yes, that's a good question. Really, I think a few of the things we say is meet yourself where you are, which is the same advice we give to our students.
Sure.
Really, I think the practice at its heart is unconditional kindness. And so I think for both students and then for those who are in training to become yoga teachers, I think meeting themselves with kindness is first and foremost.
Sure.
And that our attitude is something we can choose. And I think that having that loving, kind, open, curious attitude really goes a long way to what the students receive too.
Exactly.
And then I also think like giving them some grace.
Yes.
You know, right? We do the best we can in every moment.
Yes,
and then we keep learning, we keep trying. And you know, I think that people feel that, right? I think that they really notice if you're showing up 100% and doing the best you can. And what else can we do?
There's nothing else you can do.
Yep.
Exactly. So, do you feel after 21 years of teaching yoga and also teaching teachers, do you feel like you're still learning stuff every day as you go, or you feel like you've got a handle on this? This is it. I've learned everything I'm going to learn.
Oh my gosh! It's so funny. I just got turned on to this new podcast and an author named Bruce Tift, who I just listened to last week, and so I bought his book. And he wrote a book about the intersection of modern psychotherapy, Western science, and Buddhism. And I just think there's learning to be had everywhere. And I think that it can certainly be like how we can practice strengthening and stretching and mobility and stability and through the body. And we talked a little before about how the mind-body connection is so important. But I feel like, oh my gosh, I would love to go back to school for psychology and for physical therapy. And, you know, there's sister sciences like Ayurveda. I mean, there's just so much to learn. So I feel like being a lifelong learner is I mean, I feel so blessed.
Yeah, that is really awesome. So you have this beautiful space, and I know we're sitting in the back of it, but I mean, look out back. It's really gorgeous back there and green, and we did have a nice rainy winter, so there's a lot of flowering going on, but I'm sure it stays green too. How long have you been in this space here, your current studio?
Interestingly, so we were downtown since 2002, and our intention was to open a second space, and so we signed the lease for this Mission Hills location in 2020, and we were scheduled to open April 1st. And then COVID happened on March 18th. The kids, schools were shut down and everything was shut down. So we sat empty for a really long time, and I don't have the date of the actual reopening, but it was, of course, like everything else, when the government opened up, probably in 2021. But what we also did in that time is we started doing online classes, which is how so many fitness and wellness and
to stay alive.
Yeah. And it had always been on our list of things to do anyway. And of course, COVID gave us the little nudge. And so now all of the classes are still offered online, and we have students. I have students from San Francisco, and
that's so cool.
I have one in New York and one in Atlanta, and a few people in LA that come online when they're traveling. So
that is so neat.
Even for people that are working from home now, I think that you can come to an online class and you don't have to travel or get dressed or hit traffic or anything. So a lot of our members are hybrid.
Convenience is key. So that's how you pivoted to make it work for you during COVID. That's always my question with a lot of small businesses that have made it through and are still flourishing and being successful. So,
Yes.
and that, opens up a lot of doors, like you said, for people who can't get here. They don't live here, or but they like you as a teacher, or like one of your teachers that teaches here.
Yes.
Because I think that's really what it comes down to, is who you resonate with too. Going back to like the teaching piece of it.
Yes.
Is everybody's going to find somebody that they're like, yeah, that's my teacher.
Yes.
Yes. So.
And I think that's one of the other positives about having the online option is that people, I think, really are empowered to adapt a practice in a way that fits them. And that's really, I think, always been our calling is, yoga is for everybody.
Everybody,
We have for a variety of styles, gentle, restorative, as well as vinyasa and flow and more
sure,
athletic
some of the
styles.
more,
And then I think that the online option is that, people can turn their camera off. And I think it did really, that time also really let people explore like what feels good in my body right now. And we don't have any mirrors in our new space.
Right. I didn't notice that until you put it out.
So I really love that because it's more again about what it feels like and less about what it looks like. And I think that was a positive outcome coming out of COVID as well. Is that people really did start to explore like, hey, like what is it? What do
I want?
Yeah, every day is different.
Yes.
What do I need?
Right.
And everybody's boundaries around that had to be individual and then hopefully respected. So yes.
Well, this is really neat, and I really appreciate your time today and talking about anything and anything and everything, I should say. Sorry, it's a little late in the afternoon, and sometimes I get a little bit like a little foggy in the brain. And it's such a nice atmosphere out here. It's so beautiful. I feel very relaxed.
Good, that's good. I'm glad. I know. Yes.
So, anything else you wanna share with us before we wrap this up?
I mean, I guess I would just encourage your listeners or viewers, if yoga's been on sort of your thing to do, like either you practiced in the past and you've fallen off, or something you've always wanted to try, like I just say, like, I find it to be so invaluable. I always tell people I practice yoga not because I'm chill, but because I really need it.
Your body feels you need it.
And my mind.
And your mind.
I mean, I am very much like a go list maker. Self-employed, business owner, have 2 kids.
Right. So that's all around you compared to this beautiful practice you have here.
So
you have still to do all that.
Our space, I think there is that feeling. I hope for you and for students that come. Of I can let go of that for an hour.
Take a breath.
For 1 hour of just self-care and rejuvenation. And so I guess I would just invite, your viewers and listeners to come on by. I'd love to meet them. And if they have questions, let us know.
I will have to get by here. I'm seriously like just down in Ocean Beach compared to Mission Hills where the studio here is located.
Yes.
So
10 minutes.
I don't have an excuse.
I could come on by.
I could just go online too. I mean, seriously, and try it out that way as well.
Exactly.
So, well, I do really appreciate your time, and it's been such a great experience interviewing you and getting to learn more about you and your inspiring story from traveling all the way across the world to learn yoga and bring it back to San Diego, which was the one really surprising thing to me was that you were saying that people really didn't know what yoga was.
Right.
That just blows my mind because it is so mainstream now.
Exactly.
I mean, it's just like, wait, what? That was only 20 years ago? And that was the
look
case.
At it now. It's in advertisements and slogans and T-shirts
and
everywhere.
There's pants and everything else that are being built, clothing that's being built around it, you know. So
Yes.
Amazing. So you're like you're the on the frontier. You're the pioneer of yoga in San Diego.
I would say at least in lower, central San Diego.
Right. This area,
for this part, downtown city of San Diego, we were early adopters.
Yes. Very good job.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us today, and stay tuned for the next one.
Bye. Thanks.